Hey, Bright Lights, welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. My name is Angela. I am an architect, researcher, and a feng shui practitioner. I made it my mission to not only study the ways that the built environment impacts our well-being, but to share what I know in a way that is easy to understand so you don't have to be a scientist or a design professional. How do I do that? We use my Saluda Genesis deck, which has two parts. The first part, foundational concepts. Those are the basic science behind the way that our body and mind and spirit react to the world around us. I pair that with the 5 aspects part of the deck, which is research I've done on 5 different theories that contribute to the science of design for well-being, aka salutogenesis. I've also matched each of those aspects with a feng shui element just to help you associate better and understand better what I'm talking about. Now, there's a lot we could say about any of this research, but I know we need to keep this simple, easy to understand. So I'm going to only talk about the 2 cards I draw from each part of the deck, and I'm going to talk about them the way they relate to one another. That's why if you are interested in this, want to learn more, if you're liking what you're hearing, you definitely want to like and subscribe because you're going to learn more about the research behind each of the cards every single time I talk about them. All right. This week, I have drawn from the foundational concepts part of the deck, the habituation card. This is a really fun card because if you look at this cat traveling down the path, it really represents time and the fact that there's an event that has occurred that is startling the cat, but every time it happens again, as the cat moves forward in time, it has less and less of a reaction. And that is exactly what habituation is. It's a form of learning where your response to a stimulus weakens or even disappears upon repeated exposure. And that happens because our nervous system just becomes less sensitive to it. We decide that maybe it's not such a big deal that happened because I kept going and it wasn't so bad, and we get used to it. Now, I will say that there's a few things that affect our ability to habituate. So the first one is the change in the stimulus. So, for example, if you hear a noise all the time and it's always the same noise, you ignore it. But if it were to get louder or happen at quicker intervals or something like that, you would pay more attention to it because it would be different than what you thought you were used to. Another thing can be the intensity. Some things are just so intense that we can't ignore them, even if they happen the same way every single time. The duration, same idea. If something lasts a very long time, it's going to have more of an effect on us. So it's a little bit harder to ignore. And of course, the frequency. If we occur something all the time, we probably are going to pay less and less attention to it than if it only happens once every few months or once a year. So we really can tune out a lot. Like, for example, you can study, some people can at least, with the television going, or if you're doing tasks like cleaning or drawing or something like that, you might want to listen to music or listen to a game. There's ways we can balance our attention and tune things out. Our ability to do that, to focus and direct our attention and to only pay attention to a disruption if it is truly a threat, gets diminished when we are under a lot of stress. our attention is not as easily held in focus, or if you or someone you love is part of the neurodiverse population, you also know that that ability to prioritize among stimuli is very hard. So, habituation is a skill that maybe isn't in play, and therefore means that we have to be more sensitive to what is happening in the environment. Our ability to habituate actually pairs very nicely with the card from the aspects part of the deck, the natural light card. Now, natural light is part of the biophilia aspect. Biophilia, or I relate, is basically just a recognition that as human beings, we are part of nature, and therefore we are hardwired to respond to the natural world. And natural light, obviously, is part of the way that we experience the world. Even if you are blind, you still have photoreceptors in your skin. So your body is still physiologically responding to the natural light. So, this is a really important way to connect with nature. Studies have shown that natural light impacts things like test scores, absenteeism, productivity. In shopping environments, it increases sales. In healing environments, it actually affects health outcomes and mood. So, natural light is far from something to be discounted or to think that we can simply compensate with artificial light. It is part of the wood element in feng shui. Wood is all about growth, creativity, connectivity. So you can see where we're starting to bridge that gap. And when we think about how we either have a lack of natural light or can overcompensate with an artificial design that isn't as effective, what that has to do with habituation. Well, bright lights, especially ones that flash or turn on unexpectedly, are associated with a startle response. And what does startling us do? It activates the stress cycle within our bodies. It certainly distracts us from whatever else we were doing. And now we have to take time to calm down. So we want to think about that with habituation, because we don't get used to those bright lights, those flashing lights. That's why they're used on emergency vehicles. They're meant to break through the habituation and grab our attention. But we also want to think about the fact that many people do have sensory integration issues, and those are often associated as well with heightened anxiety. When we're in a state of anxiety, when that stress response has been activated, we're hyper vigilant. So our ability to focus our attention and do whatever it is we need to do, or our body's ability to rest, digest, and heal, that's going to be compromised. So we want to think about how artificial lighting can be disturbing. Many times, artificial lights, especially fluorescent ones, even though more and more people are adopting LED lights now, buzz or flicker. And most of us don't notice this, but people who are more neurosensitive and neurodiverse do. And it is a terrible distraction that not only can be irritating or annoying to them, but in many cases, it can do things like cause headaches or make them feel nauseous. So, this is a real problem. It's something we want to think about. Also, we want to understand that natural lighting makes us more restfully alert instead of hypervigilant, and feel less fatigue. So, if you maybe didn't get as good of a night's sleep, your attention is going to be better when you are in natural lighting than if you are in artificial lighting. So we know this makes a difference. And obviously, getting outside, being out in natural light is the best way to take advantage of this biophilic response that we have, but we can't do that. We can't always be outside. So, what else can we do? Well, certainly adding more direct access to nature is important. So, can we have doors to the outside, windows, more glass? And I'm not just talking about views, I'm talking about the ability for light to get in, meaning that a high clerestory window, a skylight, these are all going to have benefits. That feeling of that sunbeam on the floor, seeing it move around or being able to sit in the sunlight is very important. Natural light also changes in color temperature throughout the day. So in the early morning hours, it is more red and it moves through a spectrum through yellows to a brighter bluish hue at midday, and then gradually fades into yellows and reds as the evening progresses. And I mentioned we have sensors in our skin that do pick up that color temperature, which means that our circadian cycle, the release of melatonin in our body and other hormones, is tied to color temperature. So people who are in an artificially lit environment at the wrong color temperature in evening hours, their body is not getting that signal to calm down and rest because it's nighttime. So if you're noticing, for example, that you are struggling to fall asleep, you might want to pay attention to how much time you are spending in artificial light versus natural light. Now, with the advent of LED lighting, many fixtures are what they say are tunable, meaning that you can actually have them adjust color temperature throughout the day. If you use a night light, get one that is a red color so that it doesn't interrupt your sleep cycle. Now, what happens if we are within an artificially lit environment and we want to have even more enhanced benefit of natural light than just color tuning it? Well, you could think about having diffuse light, hiding the light source so that the space just kind of has a glow to it versus having a visible fixture. You can think about having dynamic light. So brightness and dimness can change. It could be brighter or dimmer in certain spaces or certain areas of a room to create a different impression. And you can also use lighting effects. So if you are out in the sunlight, you would notice that if you walked under a tree, the light would be dappled and you would just see little streams of light in between the leaves. And you can do a lot of those lighting effects with films and screens and other kinds of devices. So if you are someone who is an interior designer or an architect, think about how you can add those kinds of fixtures to the space as well. It only heightens that feeling of being in nature and enhances the benefit of the natural light in that space. To sum up for today, habituation is our ability to get used to things, and it is tied to how different an experience is to what we have become used to. So, if we want to help people be more calm, we need a more predictable environment. And if we want to grab their attention, we need a sudden, intense, or longer lasting change. We can use that knowledge when we think about how to introduce natural light into our designs by really being thoughtful not only about the color temperature of the light, but the ways that light can change using either artificial light or changing the way that we are exposed to natural light in the spaces that we design. So I hope this was helpful and gave you lots of ideas on what you can do in your own spaces as well as in spaces that you are designing. Again, if this is something you want more of, make sure that you like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Make sure to share this information with others because it helps all of us to be advocates for a better built world where our well-being is prioritized instead of us struggling to adapt to an environment that isn't really meeting our needs. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.